All right.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it just like going?
You go, girl.
Today I'm joined with astronaut John Grunsfeld, and he is a 5-time shuttle astronaut, astronomer, and chief scientist of NASA. So, John, how well do you tolerate spice?
We'll find out, won't we?
Yeah, that's for sure. So, we can go ahead and get started with our first one. Left here.
All right. Tastes like chicken.
Of course it does.
Right.
Chicken.
So, as you begin your spicy taste journey, can you tell us about how taste in space was different for you?
There's what I think is kind of an urban legend that when you go to space, things taste more bland. But really, you take some food, mystery food, like turkey tetrazzini. Nobody knows what that really is. And you freeze dry it and put it in a packet with no spices. It's going to taste bland. I think most of the shuttle foods and many of the station foods taste bland on Earth. So of course they taste bland in space. On my first mission, we had one food that was really spicy. It was great. It was shrimp cocktail, and it had a lot of horseradish in it. And so we loved that. And it's pretty common for people on space shuttle missions to have ordered shrimp cocktail at every meal so they could then trade it for other foods they liked because people wouldn't do enough. Unfortunately, in the era of flying Russian astronauts on the space shuttle, they had very low tolerance for spice, so they took most of the spice out. So we actually then flew on my second Hubble mission and the final mission something called jalapeno ketchup, so that we could spice things up.
That's very cool.
You go for the second?
Yep.
Many astronauts have a preference for what to look at on Earth, like islands or deserts. What was your favorite feature to look at in general?
So it won't surprise you. Well, my favorite feature in general is looking at the Earth. It's just the coolest. And I like to look at mountains and take pictures of mountains. I like to climb mountains. It's one of the reasons I live in Colorado. And so I'd take lots of mountain pictures.
I'm planning to come up here once I'm done with college as well.
Okay, it's a good place for aerospace. You already know that. You've been touring the last few days. So I like to take pictures of mountains. Mount Everest, is one of those. I've not climbed Mount Everest, but it's hard to find, and so it's cool when you actually get a picture of it. And I have climbed Aconcagua in South America, and unfortunately, it's almost indistinguishable from space. It's very hard to see. But I really like looking at the mountains. Now, the other thing I like looking at is the night sky. Really, it's like the most wonderful, human observatory because you can see the stars as, much brighter. They don't twinkle. You can see the color of the stars better. Unfortunately, when we're orbiting the Earth, you only get a few minutes, to do that before, it gets bright out again. Next, we have the Oaxacan mescalin.
Okay. It's got a little more bite to it. It tastes kind of like wasabi, like as in the American wasabi.
Still tastes like chicken. I don't know.
Still good.
Yep.
So when you're on a mission in the space shuttle, for example, you're not always doing mission things. There's a fair amount of downtime. So, as you mentioned earlier, there were people playing video games on the shuttle. Was there any song or piece of entertainment that was particularly impactful being in space or being able to observe the Earth in a way so unique as in the space shuttle?
We get to take, it started out with cassette tapes, then CDs, then MP3 players, and now, of course, it's just on computers. But every mission I would take up some Johann Sebastian Bach, and in particular the solo cello sonatas. However, I rarely would hear the end of anything because it was so relaxing I would go to sleep. So that was my evening listening. Now, when we launched in 2009, the new Star Trek movie had just come out. And when we were in quarantine, I had some email correspondence with Gene Roddenberry III to see if we might be able to get a pre-release copy. And they were unable to do that. And so while we were in orbit, it came out in theaters, and I arranged to have it beamed up to the shuttle, like, a little bit at a time each day in case we had time. And so with the delay by the weather in Florida, we had 2 nights. So we sat on the middeck with our laptop and were able to watch the Star Trek movie, which was pretty cool to be in space. Star Trek was inspiring to me as a kid. That was awesome. No popcorn, though.
Star Trek kind of inspired you to go into space?
I don't know, just it was, I think, I was always Mr. Spock, and just inspired by the themes in the show. I wanted to go into space long before Star Trek came out, actually.
All right, so what's this 4th one?
So this is
Los Calientes.
Los Calientes Verde, green.
Cheers.
Cheers.
It's surprisingly good.
Not particularly spicy.
Nope.
It
Although I'm sure it'll come.
It'll come over time, right?
It'll come up soon. But before it does come up, what was, who made the biggest impact on your career, just out of anyone?
So, there were multiple people that had big impacts, and one of them was my high school calculus teacher, Don Enns. He was just fantastic, and undid all of the disappointment I had in the previous math teacher. And then Patricia Mueller, who was my AP chemistry teacher, she was also just amazing in high school. Both of those two were particularly inspiring and gave me a lot of runway to explore things. I was briefly president of the math club, but also I would help. So I'm kind of the fix-it guy. I fix the Hubble, I fix cars, I fix airplanes, I fix appliances. I've just always been the fix-it guy. And so she would give me laboratory equipment that wasn't working and say, hey, can you fix it? And so I'd take it home. So I had a spectrophotometer in my bathroom for a long time that I fixed and then used to generate absorption spectra of all kinds of weird things, foods and swamp water and other stuff, just for fun. And finally she said, well, have you got it working yet? And I said, oh yeah, I've had it working for weeks. Do you need it? And I brought it back. And anyway.
Wanted to see how long you get away with it?
Yep. As far as weirdness, my childhood hero was a guy named Enrico Fermi, a physicist, who came over from Italy with the rise of Mussolini and others, and so he went to Columbia and then eventually University of Chicago and worked on the Manhattan Project. But he was a really amazing physicist who loved to climb mountains. He flew high altitude balloons to do cosmic ray research, which I eventually did, and was both a theorist and an experimentalist, which is rare in scientists, but he was an inspirational physicist. And then as an astronaut, one of my colleagues was John Young, who was just an incredible guy. I flew jets with him, but he flew Gemini, he flew Apollo, two Gemini flights, 2 Apollo flights, walked on the moon on Apollo 16, and flew the first space shuttle on Columbia with Robert Crippen, and then flew another shuttle flight. So he was just one of the smartest guys I'd ever met. Georgia Tech engineering, aerospace engineering grad, but really nice guy too.
All right, are we ready?
The 7th Reaper. The Reaper.
Yeah. All right. Obviously, going to space 5 times is absolutely incredible, but your post-astronaut career is equally as amazing. How has your management, after being an astronaut, is there any accomplishment that you're really proud of? One
of the jobs that I had, so, I just feel really lucky that I got to do all the cool things I got to do. And after being an astronaut, I went to Space Telescope Science Institute, where the Hubble is managed, and James Webb was being developed. And I discovered that there were real significant problems with the way James Webb was being managed. The technical part, the actual instruments, the mirrors, that was all going great. But the way that the management was going and the budget, I went to Matt Mountain, who was my boss. He was the director at Space Telescope one day, and said, I don't think James Webb is ever going to launch. I said, at the current rate, as it's being managed, it's unlikely to launch until the early 2020s. This was 2010. And so it's kind of funny that it launched in Christmas of 2022. Sorry, 2021, Christmas Day, because that was what I thought was unreasonable. But we were able to put together a plan to get it back on track, sell that to NASA, sell it to Congress, sell it to the administration so that they could fix it so that it would launch in 2018. And the part that I was involved with was right on track, and we delivered the instrument to the contractor for the spacecraft in 2016 so it could launch in 2018. And then they started messing it up. But that's a different story. So I'm proud that we captured that and got James Webb back on track, and that it's all working now. The other thing, the next job I had was as the associate administrator for all of science at NASA. And one of the things that I inherited was that the Mars program had gone away. And I thought that was wrong. So we had the Curiosity rover, it had just landed, and for whatever reason, the president, I don't think President Obama actually made this decision, but somebody made the decision that, okay, no more Mars exploration. And I was able to bring that back and invent the Perseverance rover and also the Ingenuity helicopter. And we've flown those, and they're doing great. And we have our Mars program back. So
it's incredible.
But it's vegan and gluten-free. How bad can it be? Cheers.
Cheers.
Different flavor.
I like that. It's like green salsa.
Mm-hmm.
What is this?
Collards.
Collards and ghost. Collard greens and ghost pepper.
Yep, it's definitely spices. The spiciest so far.
That one's not. I don't feel that one. Okay, so you obviously had to learn a lot of different things in training. I'm curious to know what was something that you were trained in that you didn't think was going to be useful at all, but ended up turning out to be very, very useful in the long run.
Well, it certainly isn't learning the Russian language. For two reasons. One, I was really bad, and two, I didn't end up going up to the space station because I got pulled to go back to Hubble. And what little Russian I know actually does turn out to be useful occasionally. I don't know, I think pretty much everything I learned as an astronaut, I used in one way or another throughout the training. And I don't think there was anything that I thought was not going to be particularly useful that ended up being super useful. Is it getting hot? A little bit? Yeah. Growing over time. You do have milk.
I can't drink it unless you drink it.
Milk. I'm holding off on the milk till it gets really spicy.
See, until I go back to my seat, I can't drink it until you drink it. And I didn't bring my water.
Okay. Well, the water doesn't do that much good. It just cools it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if I think of something, I will, I think, the one thing that I did learn as an astronaut, because I was kind of a geeky guy before that, much more than I had learned in any other setting, is how to, help develop and work well as a really tight-knit team where everybody's lives depend on everybody else. And I did kind of translate that to, much larger groups when I became, a manager and a leader of lots of people. I guess actually the one skill that I knew would be useful, but I didn't actually expect to use very much, is the medical skills. So I was a crew medical officer And so we trained basically to be an EMT, and I volunteered in public hospitals, learning all of the various skills. And on orbit, astronauts are pretty healthy, so on orbit there aren't really a lot of things that go wrong. There are things that can go wrong, but in actual practice, not that much goes wrong. So the kind of things you get to practice in space aren't that much. But after I retired as becoming an astronaut, I went and got my first responder rating, partly because I do a lot of outdoor stuff, and I do outdoor stuff with friends and family. I lead expeditions, and so I get to, fix people's blisters and, diagnose high altitude pulmonary edema and things like that. But I didn't realize that it would be useful just in general life, where, I'm out biking here in Colorado and I go around a corner and there's a bike crash, right? And I'm the first one on the scene. And I get to take care of somebody until the ambulance comes. And so that's actually been pretty useful. So I don't know what it's called Typhring's curse. Turfrin's. I don't know what the story is there, but it's 4 out of 5 on the pepper scale at the bottom.
Huh. Well, that's a different scale than the other one, so how are we supposed to know?
Well,
we'll find out.
We'll find out.
Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Interesting flavor. Tastes vaguely like chicken.
I don't taste much anymore, but I'll take your word for it. Okay, so I'm going with kind of the curse thing. NASA is full of traditions and superstitions. Was there any of both that you and your fellow astronauts were happy to be a part of?
There's a few. One of which is kind of a private one that a fellow astronaut named Marcia Ivins started, which is to wear stars and striped socks.
It's like 4th of July every time.
That's right, exactly. So that's one. Another tradition that started on my second flight was to go out for a run before launch. Morning launch if it's a day launch, or in our case, an evening launch. And that actually had an interesting, good side effect, which is to get a little bit dehydrated, because you end up sitting in your suit and on the launch pad for hours, and then before you get to orbit. And so it delays the amount of time before you have to pee the first time in space. So, anyway.
All right.
All right, we're up to the bomb. And it just says hot sauce, and it has a picture of a bomb on it.
So we'll see.
And I noticed that, many of these are down at about the same level, not this one. That one's at about the same level. Now this one's barely been touched.
This is supposedly the worst one, so taste-wise. All right. Oh no, now I feel it.
A little unusual.
Yeah? Okay. In the IMAX,
Definitely spicy.
Yeah. In the IMAX Hubble documentary, you use the Zen approach to complete your spacewalk, just focusing on one task at a time. Do you still use that in your everyday life?
So the Zen approach, the idea is that when you have some really big task that altogether seems impossible or incomprehensible that you can actually accomplish it, where there's a whole series of steps and each one is really hard. I trained this way and learned to compartmentalize, to focus just on the task at hand and not the ones that I was doing previously, because those are completed, and not all the things that are ahead that are probably also very hard, because there's no point if you don't get the one that you're working on. So for instance, taking out, in 2002, I had 38 connectors to take off, each of which was actually take off and put back on. And they were very hard. And I really had to focus, and there was no point in thinking about the ones that were complete or the ones that I had ahead of me. It's just the one connector. And by doing that one at a time, I was able to sort of keep focus and relax. And then the same thing with the tiny screws, one screw at a time. And I still apply that, to hard things, like rock climbing. If you're rock climbing, and we have great rock climbing out here in Colorado, You know, if you look up and you say, oh, I'm halfway up and it only gets harder, you know, you're going to spook yourself. But if you think, okay, I just have to reach for that hold and move up, you know, one at a time. And that, you know, the reason I call it a Zen approach is because that approach gives you a kind of inner calm where you don't have this monstrous mountain to climb. You just have to take one step.
All right. It's great.
Just like the nuggets.
It's just like the nuggets. It's just one nugget at a time.
Exactly.
I am starting to sweat just slightly.
Not slightly? I am like a full-on water park over here. Okay.
All right, so the next in our palette of hot sauces is called Psycho Hot Sauce by Dingo.
How are you so close?
And it says, warning, extreme, 15 out of 10. How bad can it be?
Wait, which one is it? Which one is it? I got them mixed up.
It's the lighter of the two.
So this
if that helps. Yes, that's right.
Okay. I'm not eating all of it. I can't. Cheers.
A little harsh.
Okay.
Are you?
I mean, some of these were flavorful. This one's a little harsh.
I'm just fine. Okay, so
Do you have a question?
yes. I'm sorry. Okay. If you had to choose a career outside of the STEM pathway, what career would you choose and why?
Yeah, pretty much everything, you know, that I've wanted to do in life has been around you know, either science or education or technology, inventing things. You know, I think I could have, I love leading in the mountains, expeditions, and so, you know, potentially, you know, I could have been a mountain guide, but part of that is, you know, I love the natural history, which is, again, drawing back to the science. I've wanted to do science ever since I can remember.
Right, and I've always thought that being a geologist would be really cool and really fascinating.
Yeah, I started out, you know, in like so many kids with paleontology, dinosaurs, fossils, then moved to geology, then over to physics and astronomy. I haven't touched my milk if other people need milk.
I haven't even poured a glass.
Something in here about the Guinness World Record.
This is Mary's first, too.
I know. I haven't eaten one yet. So
Ah.
while everybody's
Honestly, you couldn't have a head start at this point.
I do.
Yeah, but that also means that your nerves aren't deadened.
That's true. So I've been behind the camera the whole time. So I volunteered to take the last dab with Apollo. Oh goodness.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, I like the James Webb earrings.
Oh, thank you. I thought they were very fitting for tonight. Okay. Yeah. Have they all been this bad? Okay. So, my question was, if you could take anyone with you into space, any time in history, dead or alive, who would you take with you and why?
Well, for when we started doing commercial space flight, as an astronaut, we'd get lots of questions about, you know, what do you think about it? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And, you know, I think we've answered that. Now, I'm not talking about, you know, Blue Origin, New Shepard, you know, it's basically a Disney ride, you know, very advanced one, or the Virgin Galactic, you know, Spaceship Two flights that are suborbital flights. You know, I'm talking about, you know, true, you know, commercial flights to to orbit, kind of like the SpaceX flights.
Right.
But that requires that you have many tens of millions of dollars to pay for a ticket. But the way I would answer that question is to say my hope is that these early ventures, the New Shepard, the Spaceship Two, the SpaceX, will eventually, in my lifetime, lead to flights where you can do adventure tourism, like these flights, at a reasonable cost, meaning the equivalent of a very expensive cruise or something like that, and that I'd want to take my family with me. I think they'd really like to be in space and
See everything.
and see the Earth and experience that.
Yes, that's amazing. Whew. Thank you.
That's really well
I'm very impressed with all of you.
You conquered the wings of death.
Wow.
Now we have to conquer.
Did you touch your milk at all?
No.
Oh my goodness. Oh boy.
Well, thank you for letting me play your hot chicken wing spicy game. So as long as we're on the subject of chemistry and hot sauce, so I've heard you are saying, you already know that it's the capsaicin molecule that causes that hot response. And the question is, how do you get rid of that? Let's say your tongue or throat is burning, or you're going into anaphylactic shock, in which case I'm a first responder. We'll still call 911. But,
Of course we would all.
so how do you get rid of that?
I mean, I just go for milk.
So is it like the fat?
Right, so capsaicin is not soluble in water. It is soluble in milk fat. So if you want to get rid of it, you can drink. The water makes your tongue feel better, but it's not going to get rid of the heat.
And do you think any software engineer ever figured out how to run Doom?
Probably.
It's a tradition.
Sorry.
I don't think anybody deliberately. The space shuttle computers in the vehicle, were just not capable of anything like that. Amazingly reliable, and the software coding incredibly difficult. But we had IBM ThinkPad laptops, which easily would have run them. That was actually a project I started, is how to get modern computers on the space shuttle. I thought it was absurd that we had such primitive computers.
Really?
You could have just ordered pizzas.
Oh yeah.